Welcome to the Parent Ed podcast by Focus on the Family Singapore. Family life can be crazy and chaotic, so join us as we figure it out together.
Hello and welcome to the Parent Ed podcast. My name is June and I'm your host for this episode. Do you want to learn how to better communicate with your teen and perhaps even influence them? For parents, teenhood is a notoriously difficult phase of life to deal with. But maybe with the right understanding and with the right strategies, we just might be able to retain some degree of influence with our teens. Today, we are very privileged to have with us Nicholas Gabriel Lim to shed some light on this topic. Nicholas is the head of programs for youth work at the Singapore's University of Social Sciences. He has been an adolescent psychologist for the past 18 years. His mental health practice is informed by neuroscience, complemented by developmental, behavioral, and positive youth development theories. Welcome, Nicholas, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, June, for inviting me.
Your CV is quite a mouthful. Would you like to sort of describe what you do and what drives you at your work?
Sure. I really appreciate this opportunity to share my work. I'm trained in psychology. That's my training and I've been in this space for the past 20 years. I was trained in Australia and I came back and did my postgrad in Singapore and been working in the charity space for the first 10 years of my career. And then after that, I did my private practice for about 5 to 6 years and then went into public service after that. More recently, I've joined the academia. So I thought, what better way to share all my experience and my work and my learning than to teach. So that's my work. I have 3 kids, all very young. My wife and I, we are both working, but we don't have any helper. We try our best to provide whatever that we can provide to our kids and whatever they need. And I think that has shaped my wife and I in terms of our family development, family growth, and it brought us together very closely. So I really enjoy that part of my life. So sometimes my wife and I, we joke, because she's trained in the early childhood sector. So when they were growing up, she'll candidly say, "Don't tell me what to do, I know what I'm doing," I say, "Yeah, okay, you're the expert here." So, but does that mean that when they reach preteens, this is my area, that's my area of training,
Wow.
expertise? And it's like, yeah, okay, fine. I was like, okay, you say one. So we, as much as we candidly, say that to each other, but we're supporting each other through our kids growing up years, and we have good time together. Yeah, and obviously challenging time together as well. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks for sharing, Nicholas. So back to teens.
Yeah.
The topic of today is a very unique group, right? There's so much joy and excitement related to this phase of life. A lot of discovery, a lot of experimentation. But I guess the challenges also come with that. They're very much still in the process of developing their own identity, finding out their own values. I have a teen daughter at home. She's 14. And I have to tell you, some days the weather is nice and sunny, but on other days it's just dark and stormy, and sometimes for very little reason or for reasons that I don't really comprehend. So from a brain development perspective, is this normal and to be expected? What does the science tell us about this?
And thank you for allowing me to share from the brain perspective, because over the years in my practice, I have been guided by different theoretical approach. But I've landed somewhere in the middle of my career on neuroscience. And I thought that would be a good way to continue guiding my practice because it's evidence-based. I can look at brain scans, and then they will tell me, oh, okay, this is basically what's happening in my brain and anybody's brain, for example, and I can appreciate what each of us are going through. So particularly for the young people that I work with, neuroscience informed me then that actually for a young person, they are fully developed, especially at the onset of puberty, fully developed at this part of the brain called the limbic system. It's a complicated space in the brain, the limbic system. It primarily covers functions like memories, a fight or flight response, hormones regulation, meaning making. So it's right in the middle of the brain. So you imagine the hemisphere, and right in the middle of the core, for example, right, that's where the limbic system sits. So at the onset of puberty, that's fully developed. A fun fact, 101 brain development is that the structure of the brain gets fully developed by teenage years. But the neural connection is still developing, right? And the neural connection develops from the spinal cord back upwards. So you can imagine the neural connections from the back, spine, all the way up to the center of the head, top of the head, and then go to the front. So it develops from back to front. There's neural connections, despite the fact that the physical size, the structure of the brain is already fully developed. That's two things. The third thing is we need to understand also, as far as young people is concerned, that the prefrontal cortex, which is actually at the forehead above our eyebrows, right, is only fully developed by the age of 25. Give and take. When I say give and take, because the maturity of the brain, the neural connection of the brain is affected by everything around us, from the food that we eat, the people we talk to, or that we surround with, for example, all affects what we learn. And the brain grows, neurologically speaking, accordingly. Yeah, so in that sense, some people, the prefrontal may be fully developed at 25, some may be fully developed at 28, 30, or maybe as early as maybe 21, 23, or it all depends. But thereabouts, the prefrontal is fully around then. And the function of this prefrontal is basically this, that anything to do with the future, that's where the prefrontal comes in. The prefrontal is primarily responsible for things like, okay, if I don't study today, then I may not know a lot of things like 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, right? Or if I don't learn how to manage my anger, for example, I hit somebody, then I potentially might hurt somebody, or might get detention. There's a future consideration, the consequences. There's also the part about decision making. So in short, I don't typically describe the parents I work with. The prefrontal is actually the brakes. The limbic system is actually the heart, the emotional, the seat of emotions. An example of like if I was angry, if I don't use my prefrontal faculties, I'll be thinking, okay, I just punch you lah. Or I take something on the table and I just throw it here, you, for example. Or I just punch the wall and I break the chair or something like that, right? Without consideration of like what potentially might happen. If I solely operated from the limbic system, my action could be resulting in those things I just described. I am hurting somebody or hurting a property, whatever it is. But the prefrontal will tell me things like, hey, wait, if you actually punch your friend can go to hospital. Or the teacher can actually, or the parents can actually call the police. When you're called by the police, then what happens? You go to the police station. Or you go to the police station, then how do you got a black mark, that kind of thing, then you get a warning. What is that? What's the implication to you if you are actually planning for university or applying for say a public service job, for example, in the future, right? The part of the brain that considers all that is the prefrontal. So neuroscience informs us that it's not until 25 that the prefrontal fully develops, right? So onset of puberty results in the fully developed limbic system. So that would mean that we have a 10-year window between a young person having to act limbically or act emotionally to them learning how to control their emotions or manage their behaviors in a way that's not to their disadvantage. And we see people, a lot of like parents, even teachers comment, right? How come they never think on? You tell them really, ask them study hard, they don't study hard. Or tomorrow got exams, or things here, whatever it is, right? They rather play computer games first. Or they rather go out with their friends first. Or if they were angry, for example, or they were offered like say, hey, want to go to a gaming arcade or even cigarette, for example, they will think, quote unquote, think from the limbic because exciting, I can be with my friends, because that's thrilling, limbic functions. Right? But they will never think like, hey, tomorrow I got things here, or tomorrow I got actually my exams, or next week, that kind of thing, right? That is the prefrontal consideration. Right. So they don't go there. Instinctually, they don't go there. But at that point in time, when they're offered all this, right, the limbic gets extracted, right? And then they, quote unquote, think from there, and then they will act based on their limbic considerations.
So the emotions is in the driver's seat, right? The thinking process, and what happens in the future if I do this is not quite there yet.
Correct. But see, having said that, you've got to be careful. You see, it's not that they cannot think of the consequences. They can. The faculty is there. But remember I was telling you the neural connections take a while to get there, right? So that would mean that if you tell them, they got the information there. But to really act out of like, oh, wait, if I throw a punch, right, then I got to be careful that I get police catch me. They need to act. The action requires repeated learning. So that's how our brain learns, right? So for example, if we drink coffee every other day, why is it becomes a habit? Because we drink it every day. Or we brush our teeth on the right hand, we use it every day on the right hand. But if you actually change to the left hand to brush your teeth, it's a bit funny, right? You feel a bit weird. That's how the brain learns. See? So same thing, if you ask them to manage their anger, you tell them one time, it's not going to work. You need to get them to practice with you. Like saying, okay, stop, I know you're angry. Okay, can you pause right there? Hold your punches, count me 1, 2, 3, 4. And you do it not only once, but every time it happens, you do it with the child. Then the brain registers that this behavior is actually repeated. So from a brain language point of view, the neural pathway for learning how to count and calm down gets developed after repetition. Not just one time, but 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Then the brain registers. So that's what we call the neural pathway has been formed. And similarly with all other behaviors. But not that they cannot. I must say first, they can consider consequences. But really to act out of that consideration, it takes practice.
So would you say it is the parents' job then to, number one, drill it in before you play your computer games, let's do your homework, let's finish up. Is that kind of repetition what is needed? And then what else? Do we need to practice with them? Do we need to rehearse certain things with them?
Yes, it's interesting that you use the word let's do this together, because this is exactly a limbic strategy. I don't know whether you hear this now, but in my work, I often hear parents saying that you go and do your practice first. So that means the instruction is that you leave the child to go and do it by yourself. But oftentimes they don't. They will just go into the whatever they like to do, like play computer games, whatever it is, right? Or I go with my friends. But interesting that you say let's do this. That suggests that you are saying that come, I do with you. And that is a limbic strategy, because the prefrontal is something that is still developing, but they are more like with you, and they don't mind doing it with you, and they more naturally want to be with you because it's a limbic function. So if you can accompany me, you connect with me emotionally, relationally, I will do it with you. So if you can do it often enough, then yes, you're right. That guidance comes from the parent in this case, or the adult, as opposed to like when we hear some parents saying that, okay, you better go and do this first, and you expect the child go and do it, it's unlikely they will do it. If you're talking about a lot younger, all the more so you'll be like that, they won't do it because they are still training to discipline the prefrontal part of the brain. So they need a lot of guidance. So it can be teachers, it can be their older siblings, it can be their parents, grandparents, right? Because they're still developing in the brain. Any kind of support that can help reinforce the desired behavior will be very helpful.
So in a sense, you're trying to say like we kind of need to change our language. But even before we change our language, we need to change how we think, and we need to understand what they're actually struggling with.
Yes.
Right? Because if we can understand that, okay, they may see your point about the need to like study before games, but they may not always have the mental resolve to do it. And we kind of need to step in as caring adults
sometimes
to support
even,
them in this journey.
Exactly right. And sometimes even the lack of capacity and ability to do so. Right? Because resolve can only be developed if they do it often enough and they know they have developed some competency. And because they decided that this is what I want and I know I can do it, therefore there's resolve. But until then, they need to learn that they actually can do it. A lot of us, myself included, are guilty of just telling the kids certain instructions, a list of like litany of things to do. But and we expect them to do kind of thing. But they almost every other minute, every other second, I can sit my child down now. The moment I leave him, and the next minute he'll be off to doing something, but he or she will be considering from the limbic. It's more exciting, more rewarding. Maybe procrastination comes because I'm just lazy. I'm just bored, for example. They're all limbic, right, in nature.
So I wonder what other ingredients do we need to consider when it comes to being able to influence our teens to do the right things, being able to guide them, whether it's in the area of studies or in the area of life. For example, you may have a 13-year-old who believes that, it's the right time to date because I found somebody, she's attractive, and let's just go with the emotions, right? That's what my emotions is telling me to do. It's so strong, it's so loud. But then what does the parent do in that moment? Because there's so much to deal with. First of all, it's our own anxiety. Oh no, is he going to do wrong things, when he's alone? How do I talk to him or get him to see my point of view? And I think you might then call us to start with the emotions, which is very difficult for a parent because we're already going like many years ahead to say like, oh no, he's gonna do this X, Y, Z, and then this is gonna lead to this kind of life.
So I call this parents going on overdrive. So they are literally overthinking and they are primarily operating from the prefrontal, which is natural. And I would say to all parents who are listening or caregivers who are listening, right, not to fault yourself for it because we obviously are adults now and we have fully developed prefrontal. So we will naturally be at the prefrontal first. But after listening to this, I hope to, encourage the adults in general, especially working with young people, to appreciate the reality, the fact that our young people may not be there yet, especially those that are living with us. So if we are staying in the same household, for example, and obviously I can see certain things that my child is doing, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is very dangerous, or you are not doing your homework, that kind of thing. I'm thinking from my prefrontal. It's natural for us to do that. But our child is not there at that point in time. Right? And sometimes we beat ourselves for, I've been telling you like, how many times already, 1,001 time, you're still not listening to me, like some in Hokkien they say, I very big check, because I said too many times over. And then after that, some parents give up. So I want to encourage adults listening in to don't be disheartened because they are just at the stage. And I think we were all once, I know we were all once there before, and we can remember those days in which we just want to go with the so-called the flow, whatever things that brings us to provide us with the best fun time, we just want to go with it. So, but as the adult living in a household or as the adult guiding the young person, we want to do things like setting the boundaries. The older they get, the boundaries must be bigger, like a playground, for example, right? You want to expand your playground space such such that they can do anything that they want to do without considering on prefrontal, made the mistakes, but they're still safe. So to the point about having to mix with like a boyfriend, girlfriend, for example, yeah, you can go out and have fun. My boundary will sound something like, okay, you need to come back by 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. You're not allowed to stay at each other's homes, but you can bring your friend home. Like, these are boundaries. But whatever happens when they're together, like they go shopping or they go, wherever they, like school, for example, you don't know, right? But that means that they're operating within the boundaries. So if they do make a mistake or they experiment or explore certain behaviors, you need to expect that certain things may not be to your liking or maybe against your household rules, for example. Then I would consider this a learning window or window opportunity to find out what's happening. And you can even engage them by saying, oh, you want to be with this boyfriend or you want to be with this girlfriend. Name me some of the reasons why you think that you want to be going to a girlfriend or boyfriend relationship right now. Don't use the why question. Usually ask the what question. How come? Right? What made you consider that, hey, this person is actually somebody that you like to be with? All this very intentionally engaging the limbic, because to them, remember, quote unquote, they're thinking from the limbic most of the time. So if you can ask them instead of telling them, then they will offer the information to you. More than happy to do so because you are their child and they know that you care for them and love them. They will offer those information readily. Usually, almost 80 to 90% of the time usually. Notwithstanding the fact that there are obviously families who, young people grow up in a very, unsafe environment. Okay, these are exceptional cases. They may not want to provide the information as readily. So if in this kind of situation, the adults or the teachers or the youth workers who are present in their life, they will do the same thing. I would encourage them to ask them, hey, what happened? Who is this person? How come you know this person? Exciting. All this while I never hear you talk about this person, but now suddenly you want to be with this person just like that. Is there a reason why? Yeah, so you engage.
It sounds like you have to put on a very curious kind of lens when you engage with your child. Even though probably internally you might be feeling a lot more than curious. You might be feeling a bit of emotional turmoil, for example, because you are worried, you're concerned about your child. So I guess it takes a lot of willpower in a sense to kind of step back from our own emotions, right? And I think earlier you mentioned that we shouldn't ask why. I'm curious to know why not.
I suppose you can if you have the right tone, but I think there's like a quick fix kind of situation. You don't want to use or you want to avoid why, simply because a why question would give the young person an impression that I did something wrong. Therefore, you're asking me for the reason, especially if I was doing something that I was not allowed to do so. So you ask me, why you do this? Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get punished. I'm going to be like, singled out, that kind of thing, right? So be in the conversation at this stage of their life, right? We want to basically prevent all this kind of thing from coming up. Because we just want to have a conversation. And the more conversation that we have, you are keeping me at the limbic space as long as possible, as much as possible. But the more you ask me a why, I straight away go to a prefrontal, and then you will not hear me say anything to you at all. That's the last thing you want to do, especially when we are guiding them and you want to support them. And they will come up with all kinds of reasons from the prefrontal, right? Which may not be rational sometimes because they are just trying to think of our consequences and trying to run ahead of you.
They're trying to avoid that.
But they always, I hesitate to say always, but most of the time, they will give you an answer that might even shortchange the relationship or even their situation and puts them in a, worse off state than what they hope that they would like to be in. Like, for example, now I cannot go anymore. Oh no, that's the last thing any young person wants because they get punished, right? But that's not the idea as far as the adult is concerned. We don't want that to be the case. My intention is just for you to know that I care and I'm coming for a caring space and I just want to know what's happening. That's all. So we don't want to be misunderstood. I think the reverse is true also. They also don't want to be misunderstood. So if we can avoid a question like that, a why question, then that will facilitate ongoing and continual conversations.
Sounds like you're sharing some of these principles of creating a safe space for your child to come to you basically with whatever questions or dilemmas that they're facing. And that's more important in a sense because we really do want to be there. We really do want to be present to guide them through, especially when they are facing those challenges. And if we clamp them down or we put them on the defensive and, like you said, to think about all the unpleasant consequences, then it's very unlikely that they will come to you as their first port of call.
Yeah, so I always bring the parents I work with, right, on a visualization exercise and ask them to visualize 5 years or 10 years down the road, right, assuming that something really bad happened to your child. Who would you want the child to be thinking of first to call in that situation, in crisis? So assuming like you're in the police station, for example, who would you want the child to think about at that point in time to call for help? So hopefully your answer is you lah. But in order for that to happen, you need to cultivate that that connection, that bond with their child from now, such that they know, despite the fact that they will make a mistake, they have done wrong, severely wrong, because they are potentially in a crisis, so they will still think that you are the better person to call despite all odds against them. How do you cultivate that? So all these things are important. How do we cultivate that trust? How do we cultivate safe disclosure? How do we cultivate a sense of like saying apology to each other? There's this thing called developmental apology that I use. Basically means that the apology sometimes adults give to the child, it's not because you did something wrong, therefore you apologize. To an adult, it's very difficult to actually accept, because I never do anything wrong. Well, then why must I even say sorry to my child? But I say it's developmental apology because at that point in time, they're so limbic that no matter how rational you are, they just don't get you. All the good intentions, you will not connect. But the apology is meant to help them like, okay, you got me. I still don't agree with you, but I cannot find any fault in you because you already said sorry. And so you don't have that kind of like, they say the knot, the emotional knot there between the adult and the child. So sometimes it's very key. So if we can use that to cultivate the relationship, and in a time like crisis, they will remember all this, and they'll be more than happy without thinking twice to come to you and say, hey, dad or mom, I need you to come and help me. Or I'm in trouble, very, very, very deep trouble right now. And they don't mind articulating the issue. Something for adults and parents to actually really think about, because I've met many over the years, young people, when they're crisis, they don't even want to tell their parents about it, which is very sad. And parents obviously do feel sad as well. Yeah, but all can be done. It's not all doom and gloom, because all this can be cultivated now, and you can still work at it to build a relationship now.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I found that the visualization exercise that you mentioned is very helpful, because it kind of brings us from the here and now to imagine what it could be if I put in the right ingredients, if I put in the right time and effort into the relationship. It could actually look like that in the future, 5-10 years down the road. Thanks for sharing that. And I think we've heard a lot of wonderful insights from you, Nicholas. So it is with a tinge of sadness that we have to kind of let you go as we reach the end of our podcast. But yeah, I would just like to give you some space to kind of think and share if you have any last words or any last tips that you want our listeners to remember when it comes to this communicating with their teens and really protecting that space of influence that they have.
My call out to all parents and adults working with young people. The journey can be tough, can be a challenging one, but don't be disheartened, because at the very heart of your relationship with them, very often, almost always, the young people will look to you as the go-to parent, guardian, or caregiver, because they know that you have seen them grow up, and they will always have you in their heart. And when they say things in anger, in spite, they're not intentionally wanting to harm you or hurt you. It's just reactive. They're just reacting, and they're just being limbic, coming from the space that we talk about today. So don't take to heart. Instead, be intentional in your engagement. Find your own space, do your self-care, go for a walk, go for your yoga, go for your leg massage or whatever it is, right? And then after that, once you have a good mind space, then come back to it, and then you know how best to re-engage them again, because they're more limbic than you. That's number one. Number two is they don't have a fully developed prefrontal, but that does not mean that they cannot consider prefrontal considerations. But you are in a better position to pause your prefrontal considerations and say, look, I need to be in my limbic space right now. Let's park my prefrontal aside first and let me consider where they're coming from and engage them from the limbic. We as the adults are in a better position to do that more than the young person. So we want to be on top of the situation as opposed to being in the situation. And in the youth work language, when both of us are emotional, the adult and the child is emotional, right? It's a lose-lose situation.
Explosive.
Right? Explosive, yeah. And in trauma work, it's like you are escalating the situation, and when work escalates, right, then sometimes when they say run away, you can never get them back, either physically or emotionally or psychologically. Run away, sometimes it's very difficult to pull them back. And if they are invited by somebody externally and offer them a certain solution which is not so desirable, then oh no. So we want to avoid those kind of situations. So with that, I leave it with the audience, and thank you for your time. I know this is quite deep in terms of the brain science behind it, but if anybody wants to know more, I have my own website, my own name, and you can just go there and refer.
Thank you, Nicholas, for your time, also for sharing so much with our listeners. For you listeners out there, if you wish to find out more about Nicholas' work, do check him out at www.nicholasgabriellim.com. For more parenting resources, do visit our website as usual at www.family.org.sg. And do also share this podcast with a friend or a parent who may benefit from it as well. And remember to keep tuning in to the ParentNet podcast to learn and grow in your parenting journey.